Right. But you see, that's not how I work. I say to you, hey, 10 a.m. on this day. And you're like, great. And I'm like, that's it. See you then. And you're like, could we see a Google Calendar, please? I'm like, I am an actor. Like, there's nothing about me. I had to look up how to create a Google Calendar thing just for you.
Thank you. I'm so happy you learned to do that. That's what I aim to do and strive to do.
How are you?
Oh, I'm really good. I'm excited.
Good. Great. I'm going to introduce you and then we'll get straight to it.
I'm excited.
So here we go. Louisa Nicola is a neurophysiologist and billionaire coach. Louisa was a world championship triathlete and raced both nationally and internationally for Australia and competed in London, Beijing, and Auckland. After retiring in 2012, Louisa followed her dreams and went to Sydney Medical School and graduated with a particular interest in neurophysiology. Louisa is now the head of performance advisor and CEO of Neuro Athletics. Neuro Athletics' mission is to optimize mental health performance and to help educate, train, and unlock human performance through science and data with a commitment to your potential. Louisa Nicola, g'day.
Luke, that was absolutely phenomenal. You nailed that intro.
Thank you so much. Now, you have a name that rhymes. Have you ever thought, was that on purpose? Have you ever thought of just being Louise Nicola in order to combat?
Absolutely not. And you know what? Something that keeps happening in my life is people call me Nicola. And even in emails, they're like, "Hi, Nicola. It was so nice to talk to you today." I'm like, "We did talk, and that's not my name." So, yeah.
It's Ms. Nicola to you, please.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're an Aussie living in New York, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, tell me about you're a neurophysiologist, billionaire coach. This Neuro Athletics thing that you run, this business that you run. I'd love to hear about what an average day looks like for a neurophysiologist.
Look, it's an insane day. So yeah, I live in New York City. I've been here since around 2016. It was a hard start. Sydney and New York is definitely not the same. An average day for me is I'm up at 5 a.m. every morning. I'm training. I travel a lot for work. So my company, it's primarily a consulting company, if you will. We work with both corporate organizations, Fortune 500, and we also have a select few professional athletes. So because of that, I'm always on a plane. So I'm on a plane once a week. I just got back from Atlanta, where I led a group of 100 executives for IBM. So that was interesting. Next week, I'm going to be in Europe. So my days are different, but consistently I wake up at 5 a.m. every morning. I get my training done in the first 2 hours, and then I'm pretty much at my desk at 7 a.m. writing programs, looking at patient reports, and talking with my team.
Great. So when you went to talk to the people at IBM, was it IBM? IBM.
That's correct. Yeah.
What are you talking to them about? Ways to optimize their brain and performance?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. So the vice president of IBM found a tweet of mine about a year ago, and he said, Can you help my employees perform better at work? I said, well, of course, if they understand their brain, and this is how I believe with everybody. People say to me, Louisa, who do you work with? I say, well, really anybody with a brain. So anybody with a brain can learn how to optimize their brain and their physiology so they get better output in terms of better productivity, in terms of better stress management. And actually, we've done a study now in the last year with just a few of our clients within the Fortune 500 space, 3 of them to be exact. And what we've found, we've come up with this performance matrix, if you will, this corporate matrix, which kind of says that, well, when an employee gets very stressed, or when they just have so much on their plate, what then happens is, if you go down the matrix, what happens is their stress levels rise and their time management goes out of place, and they increase anxiety. What happens then is, and this is at the bottom of the matrix, is they have bad sleep. Their tolerance to alcohol decreases. So they're drinking more, they're eating worse. And then when they come back to work the next day, they're losing even more time because their brain is all muddled up. Their physiology is all muddled up. So then they go through this cycle and this loop. So I've come in as the solution on Neuro Athletics to teach them first and foremost, educate them on what is the brain, where does energy exist, how can we have better performance outputs by managing our brain and our physiology. So that's pretty much the matrix. So we're trying to stop stop this from occurring, stop the stress, stop the anxiety, increase productivity, and increase time management.
Got it. And I imagine that there's a few different ways you can go about that. I imagine there's a whole list of things that you go, okay, well, exercise, sleep, diet, your environment, those sort of things are the things that you're basically looking at, right, with these people?
Well, yeah, the main pillars that we focus on is sleep. I'm huge on sleep, nutrition, so nutrients for brain health, and exercise. And you probably think, well, Louisa, doesn't everybody know how to exercise? It's not about, so Luke, what I realize in life, and this is for myself as well, it's not about just knowing the why. You really need to know that you have to have the education on the what, the how, the when, and, why do we need to sleep, and what does good quality sleep look like, and what blocks us from having quality sleep. It's not enough to just say, hey guys, just make sure you get a good sleep tonight.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm always interested in the way in which like scientists or people who are experts in their field talk about what they know. It's always like, okay, so here's the science. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care about science. Tell me what I need to do. And that's part of what this podcast is, because I know you know the science. I know you know how everything works. What I really want to know is what we can do. So let's get straight to sleep, because I was going to go to exercise, but I reckon sleep is where we start. How much should the average person be sleeping per night?
So the average person differs. Everybody needs different types of sleep. LeBron James, he needs around 12 hours of sleep, and it's really dependent on your output during the day. Okay. So I would say, as a general overview, you don't want to be sleeping anything under 7 hours. Okay. And who really has time, especially in New York City, or actually just in 2022, who really has time to be sleeping more than 9 hours? My sweet spot is 7.5 to 8.5 hours per night. Now, don't get confused. This doesn't mean 8.5 hours in bed. Okay. I don't want time in bed. I'm talking total sleep time, TST, should be around 7.5 to 8.5 hours per night. So that generally means, and let's just say you're sticking to 8 hours, and I say you need 8 hours of quality sleep. That means you're going to be spending a total sleep time in bed, or a total amount of time in bed around 9 hours.
And how do we make sure that our total sleep time is that amount? If you struggle to sleep for that total amount of time, I imagine that would begin in the morning or with meditation, seeing sunlight. What do you tell people is the best way to make sure that they do get a full night's sleep?
Okay, so first of all, good sleep starts the moment that you wake up. So our body and our brain runs on this 24-hour clock, also known as a circadian rhythm. And we activate this via direct sunlight in our eyes first thing in the morning. So if you are doing that at 7 a.m., chances are at around 7 p.m., you're going to start to drift off, and it's that 12 hours. After that, you're going to start to get a bit tired and get a bit sleepy. If we are activating that system at 11 a.m., it's going to mess with your circadian clock. So it starts first thing in the morning. Then what happens is, why don't we start with what not to do? Okay. So prior to falling asleep, we need to have all of our systems ready to go, just like a warm up. I think that we should be warming up to sleep. But some of the things that stop us from this warm up is substances. So let's first talk about caffeine. I love caffeine, but unfortunately, if I have it after 12 hours due to its half-life, it's going to mess up my sleep. So one thing that you can be doing is, first and foremost, starting your circadian clock at around 7 a.m., going out and getting natural sunlight. Second thing is, you can have your cup of coffee, but make sure you're not having it after 12 p.m. because it will mess up your sleep time. Even if you think you can sleep well, you can sleep better if you don't have caffeine. Then let's move further along. A lot of the exercise that I prescribe should generally happen mid-morning, or between, I would say, like 7 and 2 p.m. You don't really want to be exercising later than that, or close to bedtime, or close to decompressing time. So exercise should happen during that time. And then as we move later towards the evening, that's where it gets really tricky, because we have things at our disposal, such as televisions, screens, and these are the things that are going to signal to our brain that we're awake. So when the sun starts to set, what happens is we start to secrete little amounts of the sleepy hormone. It's called melatonin. So melatonin gets secreted from the amygdala, which is a little structure in your brain, and this hormone is responsible for sleep. So it helps us fall asleep and stay asleep. But unfortunately, it's the hormone of darkness. So if we are constantly looking at light, we're going to signal to our brain, hey, we're awake, it's daytime, don't push out the melatonin. So we want to start minimizing light exposure from the hours of 8 p.m. or 8 or 9 p.m. Okay.
So I just want to say the hormone of darkness into the microphone really quickly if I can. The hormone of darkness. The hormone of darkness. It sounds like something from Lord of the Rings. But wait, let's go back to the exercise thing, because you said don't exercise too late in the day. And that would be because of our body temperatures. Our body temperatures rise too much.
Body temperature, but also...
Yeah. Go on.
Well, yes and no, but I wouldn't look at it as more temperature. I would look at it as more cortisol. You know, we're waking our body up. We're secreting all of this cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which is going to keep us up at night. And that's going to really block us from decompressing, because some of us need around 2 hours to just decompress at night, get rid of the laptops and quiet our minds down so we can relax before we get into sleep. Okay.
Yeah,
so let's stay on light exposure, because this is a big one. And you've probably seen that a lot of us, actually, I think I've seen you wearing blue light blocking glasses. Is this correct?
I don't know if I should say yes, because you're going to tell me that I shouldn't or something. Yeah.
Well, no, actually, look, it is good.
Okay, good.
Blue light blocking. So you do wear them, and that's great. However, you have to caution that, because people just stick a Band-Aid on things. You know, we're like, it's fine. I can stare at the television because I've got these blue light. It doesn't work like that. So once you've been up for enormous amounts of hours, which is during the day, you put these blue light blocking glasses on, but they probably, I wear them too, by the way.
Okay.
But they're probably serving as more of a placebo, because your eyes are so susceptible at night to because they're weakened. So they're so susceptible to getting in light. So any form of light is really going to have an effect. So wear them if you can, but the best bet that you can do is actually minimizing the light. So for my computer, I have this screen that I put on, and it dims the light. It's so hard to look at my screen at night, but I'm minimizing that blue light exposure. My apartment, you will not see lights in it, overhead lighting, I should say. So you won't see any overhead lighting from 8 p.m. onwards. I have floor lighting. Okay. Wow. So I do floor lighting, so you don't really activate that system and tell your brain that you're awake. And a lot of people like to do this with candles. For example, if you have candles instead of lighting, that's going to be better for you. And of course, not looking at a television or your phone prior to going to sleep.
Yeah, because that's the other thing about, I might wear the blue light blockers or dim all the lights, but the other thing is stimulation of the brain. If I'm doing all the right things as far as light is concerned, but then I'm on TikTok, which is a highly stimulating, or just Instagram, highly stimulating app, the blue light blockers are really a Band-Aid. And even the lights, if they're dimmed, are a Band-Aid. Like, the stimulation of the brain is the thing that I think I need the most help with, and I think a lot of people do too, because they might nail the light thing, but if they don't nail the stimulation thing, or even watching like a murder mystery on Netflix, can probably make your brain be too alert and too stimulated pre-bed. Have you got any tips for that?
Yeah, no, that's actually a good one too. So one of the two biggest complaints when you go into a sleep lab, you get asked two questions, and it is, are you having trouble falling asleep, or you have trouble staying asleep? And the ones who say, I'm having trouble falling asleep, it's mainly because their mind is racing. They're either stressed, or they're stimulated, or they're thinking too fast. And then we have to work on ways to decompress the mind. And from a supplemental point of view, some of my athletes are supplementing with GABA. And GABA is short for gamma aminobutyric acid. So it's a neurotransmitter, and it's our chief inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it inhibits a synapse. And without getting too sciencey, what this does is it really just calms your mind down and it calms your brain down. So you haven't got all these synapses and all these neurotransmitters firing. You're calming your brain down. And if you have this an hour before you go to sleep, you calm your mind down. But you do, again, this comes with caution because it is also, it's not just a Band-Aid. You have to do the work as well. It's not like you can just take it and then just go and be crazy on your phone. You have to do the work.
A synapse, if you don't mind me asking, a synapse would be like a stimulation in the brain, like a bam, like it kind of sounds like a stimulation in the brain.
Yeah, it pretty much is. It's a chemical occurrence between when one neuron fires to the next neuron, it creates a synapse. And it happens through this thing called the sodium-potassium pump, and that's how they communicate with one another. And we've got anywhere from 80 to 100 billion neurons in the brain, and they're all firing together, creating thoughts, creating actions, creating movements. So we want to lower those at night.
I'd love to hear what else you get your people to supplement with for sleep in particular, and anything other than GABA.
So, and GABA is not for everybody, just for those who are like, I have trouble calming my mind down. One thing that I absolutely love is magnesium L-threonate. I take it right now, and it puts me into such a deep sleep. So, with magnesium, there's 3 forms. And this particular form has been known, although the evidence is still not quite there, but it's been noted by several neurobiologists that this form of magnesium crosses the blood-brain barrier. And when it does this, it has an effect within the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord. So it's like having, when they say have magnesium, a lot of Americans are actually deficient, and Australians, in magnesium. But when you have this mineral, it calms your body down. They say, have this to replenish your muscles before you, if you're really sore. It's like that for your brain. And when I have it, it just completely decompresses me. So GABA, magnesium L-threonate. I caution against melatonin, exogenous melatonin, for several reasons. I don't have it. The only time I would have it, and I would only have 2 milligrams, is if I'm traveling internationally and my circadian rhythm is all off.
Yeah, right.
So
my wife was taking it, and we have these 3 milligram pills that were in the house, and she was like, "You take 3 of them," and I'm like, "How many of them are you taking?" She's like 3. I'm like 9 milligrams of melatonin. I was like, we need to. It's far too strong, because I think even in the body, you can tell me this. Even the amount of melatonin that you naturally secrete if you're healthy is like a very, very small amount. It's not like 3 milligrams is a really large amount. She was hitting 9 milligrams of melatonin.
and what generally happens is, was she waking up?
You know what? I think she's a good sleeper as it is. Like, she was somehow getting through it, but I had to tell her, like, we can't, don't take melatonin. We need to naturally teach our bodies to produce it. What do you think about that?
Well, with the pineal gland, what happens is, which is where it's secreted from, I said, by the way, earlier on, I'm writing a report on the limbic system, and part of the limbic system is the amygdala. And I mentioned earlier that that's where it's secreted from, and it's not. It's secreted from the pineal gland. So that's my correction, guys. Don't come at me.
Everyone's very upset, actually. Everyone's really upset.
I knew that wasn't. I've just got so much in my head. But when it's secreted, it's not secreted it doesn't just dump it at 8 p.m. The pineal gland doesn't say, okay, dump 10 milligrams, boom. It does it over the course of the entire night to keep us asleep. And what happens is, if you are waking up, let's just say at 4 a.m., that's generally because you have run out of melatonin, and that's why you're waking up spontaneously. Fun fact, most men over the age of 70 are waking up at 4 a.m. Isn't that interesting? There's always this 4 a.m. and they're always running to the bathroom at that time. I don't know the science behind that yet. Yeah, so that's what you have to look forward to if you don't start correcting some of your sleep right now. So hold off on the melatonin. You don't want it. Let's try and secrete it naturally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I know why the 70-year-old men wake up at 4 a.m. It's because they've watched an entire night of news. Like, they'll watch Channel 10 news at 5, and then they'll watch Channel 9 at 6, and then they'll flip over to ABC at 7, and then they'll watch the 7:30 report. And it's like, you just watched 4 hours of news and you think that you're going to be able to go to sleep and stay asleep? I don't think so. That's just a joke, by the way. I don't actually think that's what it is. But it is strange that they're up so early.
What's happening after that is at 4 a.m. they're getting up and they're going to the bathroom and they're switching the lights on, and that light is coming into the eyes for the first time in 6 or 7 hours, and your brain is like, oh my God, we're awake. And then boom, you get this huge surge of cortisol and it keeps them awake. And their complaints are like, I wake up at 4 and I can't get back to sleep. So there is an issue there. So, okay, let's move on. And I know this podcast isn't too much about the why, but I just want to spend 1 minute on educating your audience on why you need to really practice good sleep hygiene.
Please.
We've got 4 stages of sleep that occur. We've got stage 1, that's falling asleep. We've got stage 2, it's light sleep. Then we've got stage 3. Now, this stage is called deep sleep or slow wave sleep. All right. And you can measure this using an Oura ring, a Whoop, whatever it is that you measure. But this particular stage is where we get a lot of our hormones that get secreted, such as testosterone, estrogen. We also get human growth hormones. So if you are training hard and you want to recover, the best form of recovery happens during slow wave deep sleep. So you want to be getting into that. Another thing that happens is we activate this system called the glymphatic system. It's like the lymphatic system in your body, but it's in your brain, and it's like a sewage system. So once you're in the deep sleep, this system gets activated, and your cerebral spinal fluid goes through your brain and cleans out all of the toxins and all the debris. So if you are not optimizing sleep, and if you are doing things that kick you out of deep sleep, then you're not going to activate this glymphatic system, and you're just not going to get the benefits of the deep sleep stages. Okay. Then we move into REM sleep, which is the 4th stage, rapid eye movement sleep. And this serves as emotional first aid. So if you are one that gets triggered, or you've got a light fuse and you're very angry, you might want to look at how can you increase this stage of sleep? How can you increase REM sleep? This is where a lot of our memories and dreams happen, I should say, during this stage. So sleep isn't just to feel good. So many neurological processes happen during sleep that are necessary for everyday living, but also to optimize and upgrade your performance.
Yeah, I love that. I love REM sleep, or at least that's when I notice that I'm dreaming. Where I wake up and I think, oh, I was dreaming, that's when I usually think, oh, that's the REM right there. Is that true?
Yeah.
Or am I just thinking that?
Yeah. No, that's actually correct. And people ask, what should we be aiming for? So if you do track and measure your sleep, you should be aiming for 20% of total sleep time to be made up of REM sleep. And this morning I woke up, I had a HRV of 200, which is fantastic, but my REM sleep was lowered. It was actually around 14%, which is bad for me. I usually try and aim for around 21% of total sleep time. And REM sleep is very much correlated with circadian rhythm. So if I fall asleep at 9:30 p.m., my REM sleep score is going to be higher. Last night, I fell asleep close to midnight, which is rare for me. Therefore, it was diminished. Another thing that kicks you out of REM sleep, completely diminishes it, is alcohol. So lay off the alcohol.
Okay, so alcohol, I heard this, and I don't know if it's true, but so you can confirm it for me, that if you do drink alcohol every night of the week, for instance, your REM sleep is so diminished that you will get REM, your brain naturally will need it, and you'll get it during waking hours, as in you'll start seeing things, almost envisioning things, almost dreaming, daydreaming. Is that true?
Well, that's like hallucinations. And in fact, they did a study on this to confirm it was an RCT, which is a gold standard in academic research. And what they found was they sleep deprived these endurance athletes, those adventure runners who like sleep for an hour. And over the course of 3 days of sleep deprivation, of sleeping just 1 hour each night, so 3 hours in 3 days, these runners started hallucinating. They started seeing things. And this is due to a lack of REM sleep, but also just due to a lack of deep sleep as well. So you can become, you can start to hallucinate when you don't get into these stages. But The why behind it. Well, alcohol is a sedative. Ethanol, the active ingredient in alcohol that makes us feel whatever we feel, is a sedative. So what is a sedative? Well, that's something that's just going to knock you out. It's not going to put you into sleep. When you go into surgery, you have something called propofol, and that is a sedative. So you're sedating yourself by giving yourself alcohol. You're numbing yourself. You're not putting yourself into sleep. So then, you can say, well, Louisa, you're just not fun. Let me also say, let's get on the other end of the spectrum and say, well, what does science say? Science says that it's okay. It's not too bad to drink, but you might want to do it furthest away from sleep. So I don't promote day drinking, but if you were to drink, it would be better to have it during the day so it metabolizes and gets out of your system.
Well, are you more fun when you've had better REM sleep?
I'm a better person. Yes. I'm a better person to everybody when I have slept well. When I haven't, I'm just a terrible person, unfortunately.
Well, I was going to say today is striking me that way because your REM has been you're not very nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but here's my question about, I want to talk about you were mentioning that you work with these, people who are really very highly productive and they can get stressed and have a lot on their plate. Ways to unwind at the end of the day to make sure that you can put work at work and get to sleep well. Do you encourage meditation, for instance? I'd love to hear about what you supplement for that.
I love meditation, but I first find what the trigger is. My trigger is Instagram. Okay. I will see something on Instagram and then I'll want to investigate it. And is this true? And then she's wearing this and he's doing that and she's gone there. And it's just, I'm one of those people. I'm like, what's going on? And I can find myself being triggered, but a television won't trigger me. So you have to first find what your trigger is and start to eliminate it. Don't go cold turkey. Maybe eliminate 15 minutes of it and then move further in the night. Things that can help you are getting into a magnesium salt bath. That always relaxes people. That always relaxes me. And then having a look at what you're eating as well. So I always say to backload your carbs, backloading meaning have them at the end of the night because certain carbohydrates and starchy foods make you sleepy. So having that, and then just pick your poison. What makes you de-stress at night? Everybody is different. I de-stress with an episode of Friends, for example, that eliminates everything in my mind and it relaxes me. Meditation is great. People like to meditate, and I always say try and meditate furthest away from sleep. But if you want to meditate at night, if that calms you down, then feel free to do so.
Yeah, got it. What about breathing exercises? Are you into those?
I practice breath work every day, and I usually practice it around 2 p.m. because that's when I'm feeling my slump in my performance. And when we actually go out to corporate organizations, when we do a survey, they always say, Louisa, I'm reaching for the coffee at 2 or around 2 to 3 p.m. That's when they're getting their slump. So I say, let's practice some deep breathing. You're not only getting oxygen to your body and your brain, but it's also calming you down. You're activating this parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest. You're calming yourself down, and then you can get into the second half of the day.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure a lot of listeners out there feel that 2 p.m., 3 p.m. slump. Tell me about the breathing exercise. Could you tell us exactly what you do?
Yeah, I do a double inhale, exhale, which is like the psychological sigh that babies do to calm themselves down. I do that, but I also you did it. You nailed it. Are you really calm now?
I am. I actually love the physiological side because so just to clarify, it's a double inhale, like you breathe in deeply and then you take another sip on top of that and then you breathe slowly throughout the mouth, out of the mouth. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. But then there's also box breathing, which is breathing in for 5, holding it for 5, breathing out for 5, holding it for 5, and doing that for a repeated, 5 minutes. Any form of breath work really is going to have this effect. You just need to do it for 5 minutes. You can do it with your eyes open, your eyes closed, but that physiological sigh is really good if you're preparing for a meeting and you're stressing out, or you've got so much in your brain and your brain's going a million miles an hour, and de-stressing that.
And so how long will you do a physiological sigh for? Would you do 5 minutes of it, or would you do 30 rounds of it, or how do you do it?
I'll do 30 rounds of it, or I'll do 5 minutes of it. And I've got to tell you, it's the best thing to just completely bring you back down to homeostasis and bring you back down to equilibrium.
Yeah, I love that. So what is the science of the sigh in particular that made you want to do it?
Well, what you're doing is you're feeling, so when you just described it really well, when you're breathing in, you're filling up all of these little air sacs, these alveoli in your lungs. But what happens is when we're doing that, we still have a little moment where we can fill them up even more. And that is that second sigh. And then you're just releasing all of that. So you're actually getting in more of the amount of oxygen than what you would usually do during normal breathing. And in fact, most of us, I don't know what the percentage is, but most of us are walking around and not breathing correctly. We're breathing through our chest. We're doing a lot of shallow breathing. And then if you're stressing out during the day and getting all of this carbon dioxide into your lungs, your carbon dioxide to oxygen ratio is off, then you're going to be naturally anxious.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk about exercise, because I know that you're a triathlete, so you're very passionate about it. You must know. Was, yeah. Well, that's important to note because it means you were boring, but you're really fun now.
It's exactly right. When you're a triathlete, you are very boring. You don't drink, you don't socialize. So exercise is huge. And I always believed in the power of it in terms of brain health. But it wasn't until I really dug into this with my research that I found that there is a very strong correlation between exercise and brain health. And I'll take you down a journey, which is what I usually do. Started in 1999, Luke. That's when we scientists first went out and they wanted to discover what the relationship between physical activity and brain health was. So they started with mice. They got these mice on a treadmill. They were running and running, and they did this protocol, aerobic physical activity, for 6 months. And what they found at the end of this study was the mice grew new neurons in the hippocampus. Okay, the hippocampus is this structure here in the temporal lobe, which is just here. If you're watching on YouTube, where the ears are, on either side of the brain. And this is where our limbic system lives. And our hippocampus is where episodic memories are formed. And they found that they grew new brain cells in the hippocampus, and they grew the regions of the hippocampus. They thought, wow, that's incredible. So they wanted to replicate this. And they wanted to do this on humans. So as it evolved, and it turns out that with humans, when you exercise and you do aerobic physical activity, you can grow new neurons within the hippocampus, but you can't grow new neurons in the brain. So neurogenesis, if you will, doesn't exist in adults, but exists in mice. So we knew then, oh, great. So there is this strong correlation between the memory regions of the brain, the hippocampus, and physical activity. So we've nailed that. We know that. So then they wanted to move on to resistance training, and they thought, well, these effects happen. Does it happen with resistance training? And there was a wonderful study done. It was a systematic review by Harold et al. And they went through and they pulled together all of the studies that have been done on resistance training and brain health. And they found 3 things. They found that resistance training changes the structure of your brain, the way it's shaped. Okay. So you can literally grow the structure of your brain with resistance training. You can grow the functionality of your brain. So how well it functions. Okay. And you can also change the areas, the subregions of the hippocampus. Okay. So let's talk about how this happens, because I love resistance training, and a lot of women are afraid of resistance training. So when we perform any type of resistance training effort, let's just say we're performing a muscle contraction. Okay. A bicep contraction. You're doing what are these called? Bicep curl. A bicep curl. Let's just take this for example.
Let's go.
Yeah. Your muscles are releasing and secreting myokines. So myokines are muscle-based proteins. And these myokines, when they get secreted, they have the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and have an effect on cognitive functions. For example, we have this wonderful myokine called irisin. Okay. Irisin gets secreted from the muscles. It goes up and goes into the brain. And it can have an effect on the frontal lobe, which then has an effect on cognitive functions such as attention, decision-making, memory. So you're enhancing those areas of the brain. We've got lactate. We've got cathepsin B. So these important molecules get released, and they don't get released during aerobic activity. And these are really important molecules for enhancing functionality of the brain and structure of the brain. We also get IGF-1, which gets released. And I just think that resistance training is amazing. However, as a caveat, you have to be lifting heavy. And specifically, you have to be lifting 70% of your 1 repetition max to get these effects.
It's probably a good idea for people out there who are listening, wondering where they begin. If they're just beginning their resistance training journey, you don't have to have a trainer the entire time, but it might be good to have a trainer for just a couple of weeks who walks you through exactly how to do certain movements. And then we can figure out your 1 rep max and have them do that within a couple of weeks. Then you can get rid of the trainer. You don't need to be paying for a trainer the entire time, but it's important to figure out that 1 rep max. Then you can do 70% of that. And you're saying that that's how you get all these cognitive benefits, by hanging around that 70% region.
Yeah. And you know that as you keep training, you have to keep working on that load, because 70% of your 1RM may not be 70% of your 1RM in 3 or 4 weeks because you get stronger. So you do have to be pushing hard. You can't just go out and just do just tiny little weights. You have to push hard. You have to induce the breaking of the muscle fibers to get these effects. But for just so you're wondering, there's women out there, and I see this every day, who are afraid to lift weights. It's really important to know that our brain fully develops at around 25 years old. And then after that, we all go through a natural brain aging process. Our things just start to shrink. Our hippocampal volume, the volume of our hippocampus, shrinks by 2% every decade. So it's getting smaller and smaller. That's why memory gets we have memory dysfunction and memory decline as we get older. When we lose sleep, we're interfering with the structure of our brain and the functionality of our brain. So as we get older, we're just having so much deterioration in our brain. So we can slow the progression of these natural brain aging processes by lifting heavy. And you really only need to be doing it 3 times a week, minimum.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we have seen a cultural shift from about 10 years ago, where you didn't see any women in the weights room, to now seeing a whole bunch of women in the weights room. And I think that's culturally because of what we see as aesthetically pleasing. Like we like our women to be, what is it? The Kardashians, like big butts and little waists and things like that. That's kind of pushed women into the weights room, like, oh, I've got to build a butt. But what they're actually doing is they're helping their brain age slower. Would you say that?
Yes. You're helping your brain age slower by physical activity. So you can't discount aerobic activity either. General recommendations is 90 minutes a week of zone 2 training. And zone 2 is that training where you're exercising, but you're also able to talk to somebody and have a conversation. Okay.
Yeah,
but you're huffing and puffing, but
Sorry. Yeah. I do want to ask you about zone 2 because it's fascinating. And just to clarify, it's a type of cardio, right? So you can kind of be on a treadmill, and you could talk to somebody next to you and keep going the pace that you're going, but you don't really want to. Is that right?
Yeah, you could talk to them, and it's best to do this while you're on a machine, because when you're outside, your zones go all up and down, especially if you're running in New York City, you're at traffic lights. So it's best to do this on a stationary bike, for example. And to get the full benefits of this, you want to be doing it for at least 1 hour. Well, general guidelines and recommendations is to do it for around 45 minutes to an hour, 3 times a week. So for me, I'm doing 3 hours a week of zone 2. I put a podcast on. That's where I do a lot of my listening for my books. And I'm measuring this I've done a lactate test. So I've actually gotten my true zone 2, but a great way to measure this is literally just get on a treadmill, put on an incline of maybe 8, and just keep walking till you can have a conversation, but you're also huffing and puffing.
Yeah, got it. So what does that do? Why is zone 2 so great for you?
So we have this structure inside our cells called the mitochondria, and this is where energy production occurs. This is where ATP production occurs. They call it the powerhouse of the cell. And when we are training, if we want to be training the mitochondria, because it turns out for longevity purposes, there was a study that was done on centenarians, those who lived to 100, and it turns out that they've got more mitochondria than other people who didn't live to that age. So we know that mitochondria is good. More mitochondria is great. We can grow mitochondria. We can grow new ones in our cell. So if we've got around, I think the average is maybe we've got around 30,000 mitochondria per cell. Maybe we want 40,000. And this means that we have a greater proficiency to live maybe, longer. We can increase our health span, our lifespan. We can have more energy. So how do we do this? Well, we need to be training within the mitochondria. And if you train outside, if you go into and dip into zone 3, you then use a different energy system. So you then produce more lactate. You're not training within the mitochondria. So if we want to train in the mitochondria and have these mitochondria more efficient, meaning that we want them to be, we don't just want to grow more, but we want the existing ones to be strong and efficient. And to do that, we have to train them. And to train them, we have to be training in that zone 2, zone. And zone 2 may mean that you're training at around 60% of your maximum heart rate. So you want to be training, you can, whatever that is for people. So there's probably like a 10 beat, process that you can be training within.
What about the effects of exercise and Alzheimer's? Are there any links between those two things?
Oh my gosh. If there was one thing that people could choose to delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease, it's exercise. There are so many interventions now and so much study. As a scientist, you would find it extremely difficult to prescribe anything better than exercise when it comes to Alzheimer's disease. Now, first and foremost, Alzheimer's disease is both a hereditary disease. So you can either get it from your parents, and you can check this with a genetic test, or you can actually induce this yourself. And that's scary because it turns out that 90% of the current population of Alzheimer's disease patients have the non-genetic form, meaning that they've induced this through environmental factors such as lack of sleep, alcohol, environmental toxins, etc. But exercising can delay the onset of getting Alzheimer's disease. Exercise and sleep are the two biggest things that you can be doing to delay that process.
Yeah, and that has something to do with gray matter, which I don't understand. What is the gray matter in the brain?
Yeah, in our brain, if you slice it, the outside of it you'll see is made up of gray matter, and the inside of it is made up of white matter. And white matter houses our myelinated neurons. So the gray matter, which is out here on the cortex and the prefrontal cortex and all of the different lobes, what happens is when we get Alzheimer's disease, for example, we get these plaques and tangles. They generally start in the white matter, and we generally get the buildup of phosphorylated tau proteins. It's a protein that exists, and we all need these tau proteins. We all have them. But when things start to get a bit, they're not working properly, when we're not activating that lymphatic system over and over, and we're getting a buildup, they form these little plaques and these little tangles, and then that becomes it just sits there. And then things can't, in our myelinated neurons, processes can't go down these neurons, and they start to die off. That's when we get memory complaints, and we get these in the deep structures, such as where the hippocampus lives. So yes, exercising can help you structurally and functionally. I just want to also say that these neurodegenerative diseases, no matter which one it is, the dementias, let's just say, dementia is the umbrella term, Alzheimer's disease sits underneath there. These things don't just happen sporadically in your 60s. They start at a young age. They start in your 20s and in your 30s. And before symptoms occur, it is said that Alzheimer's disease started 20 years before the symptoms actually occur.
Wow.
Yeah. So we want to get a handle of that. We want to do what Mother Nature gave us. This can't be given to you in a pill. So it's literally just what your grandparents told you: sleep, exercise, get natural sunlight, and eat a great diet.
Bam, let's lead straight into diet. I would love to talk about what you eat, because I imagine you practice what you preach when it comes to eating for the brain. So what do you eat?
Yeah. So look, I don't prescribe to anything plant, carnivore. I eat everything. I'm also Greek, which should give you an insight into my red meat intake. But I love red meat. But let's, for the purpose of this and maximize our time, let's talk about essential nutrients for brain health. And one of them that I talk about incessantly is EPA DHA. So omega-3 fatty acids, which comes from fatty fish, can be broken up into three components. It's EPA, DHA, and ALA. Now, this ALA form is more so what you get from plants and flax seeds, for example. It's what the vegans might take. But ALA has to be converted into EPA. So it goes through more of a chemical process. So I just have the EPA DHA. And what the studies now are showing, that if you are depleted in EPA DHA, so you can go and get an omega-3 index test, which tests the amount of omega-3 in a red blood cell. And if you are sitting low on that, you are pretty much comparable to a smoker. That's pretty scary, right? Because we know how smoking is bad for you, and smokers have a 40% increased risk of death as opposed to a non-smoker. So that should show you how important this is. Also, the brain is 70% fat. So 70% water and the rest of it is fat. So what type of fat is this made up of? It's made up of this DHA, the components found in omega-3 fatty acids. So we really need to be supplementing with this. So I supplement with 2 grams in the morning and 2 grams at night. So that's a total of 4 grams per day. And this is not just good for your brain. Obviously, it crosses the blood-brain barrier. This is also good for immunity. It's great for eliminating, or I would say, decreasing inflammatory biomarkers. So if you're stressed and you've got a lot of inflammation, you can offset that with having a high omega-3 index. So I'm supplementing with that every single day.
I want to know what brand you take in. Hit me with it.
Yeah, it's funny because I've actually got it right here. And yeah, I was ingesting it before we spoke. I always ingest it with a meal, and I'm having Momentous. It's this is by far, and if you're a fan of Andrew Huberman, he's one of the he's on the board of advisors for Momentous, and
amazing.
I have for several, and I don't want to put any brands out there, but for several years I've actually gone through and done third-party testing. I've looked at manufacturers and I've looked at what makes a quality supplement, and many things make a quality supplement. And if you look at how these are certified, there's certain supplements that are certified. These Momentous supplements are triple certified. So I take that. They're not rancid. They're not coated with anything else. That's where I get all of my supplements from. So supplementing 2 grams in the morning and 2 grams at night. I'm also
2 grams of DHA is a lot. I mean, it's hard actually to get that even from a supplement. Like even I take a fish oil supplement. I don't think the DHA is that as high as that. So you need to really be getting and making sure that the product is incredible and potent, right? Yeah,
potent. You generally will find that the EPA is more. So you have to, so for me, for example, I have to take 3. So I take 3 capsules in the morning and 3 at night. So it just depends on where you get it from. So make sure you're looking for not omega-3, make sure you're looking for EPA DHA. Okay, you can eliminate the ALA.
Yeah, got it. I mean, I know how important that is for babies in particular because my wife's pregnant right now, and last time even like they were like DHA, how vital that is, especially when the baby's born as well. Like DHA, how vital that is for a baby.
Yeah, neural development, and I have so much information. I'm constantly, my team puts out a weekly newsletter, and every single week we always touch on EPA DHA, and people are writing in, they're like, well, is that all you eat? I'm like, well, pretty much, yeah. But no, I'm also ingesting, when it comes from nutrients for brain health, I'm also ingesting 5,000 IUs of vitamin D. Am I depleted in it? No, I'm actually, I get my bloods checked every 4 months, which is quite crazy. You only really need to go once a year. But I'm always experimenting on myself. So I'm having vitamin D, it's both a vitamin and a hormone. Incredibly important for so many different processes from a DNA level. So supplementing with vitamin D. I'm having 5,000 IUs per day. It's also great for bone mineral density. So you don't want to be depleted in this.
And I've also heard you talk about it in regards to fertility.
Oh, fertility, absolutely. So there was a study that was done on a randomized controlled trial done on women, and they showed that those who were susceptible to miscarriages and infertility had an extremely low vitamin D score as opposed to those who weren't. So vitamin D plays a role in not just fertility for women, but also for men.
Got it. And like, you know, when we talk about the brain being so made up of fat, I think you said 30%, like DHA and EPA or the fish oil that you mentioned, that's great. But what about things like, you know, butter, or you hear about, you know, MCT oil being incredible for the brain? What do you think about those type of fats?
No, look, those type of fats are great. It honestly depends on what your outcomes are. So if I had to pick anything, because you also got to think of calories, right? It really, if you're trying to maintain a healthy weight and BMI, you've also got to think about calories and where are you choosing to get those from? Because unfortunately, these EPA, DHA is oil and they are calories as well. So MCTs are great for you as well. You can have your grass-fed butter. I don't prescribe to the grass-fed butter in my coffee in the mornings, but I do cook in it. I do eat it. I don't go near kiddie food. Like you wouldn't find me getting my calories from sugar. You'd find me getting my calories from a steak.
Yeah, me too. I'm exactly like that. In fact, I like steak so much that I started taking away the butter in my coffee in the morning because I was like, well, my cholesterol levels probably need to just calm down a little bit. I probably don't need butter in my coffee in the morning.
Well, it turns out that dietary cholesterol has no effect on serum cholesterol levels in your blood. Yeah, that's also not Oh, I can't explain it. That's what I'm researching this week because I was like, what? I'm like, I could be eating all these croissants. It doesn't turn out that way. So, but I just wanted to put that out there. And before we wrap up, I do want to also point out that, an important nutrient for your brain is water. And I'll tell you why, because we've brought up what a synapse is. When I mentioned the synapse, when one neuron communicates with another, it happens via something called a sodium-potassium pump. Luke, sodium and potassium are electrolytes. So that means then that your brain, the way it signals, the way it operates on water, but it also operates on electrolytes. So I don't know where this notion came out that, oh, if you sweat, you need to replenish your electrolytes. Well, yes, that's true, but you don't need to be sweating because your brain literally relies on sodium, potassium, zinc, chloride. So you need these things for your brain signals to actually work. So during the day, I've got a cup of water, I've got electrolytes, I'm always ingesting both. And I would suggest anybody, if you're having that afternoon slump at around 2 p.m., maybe get a sachet of electrolytes, put it in your water and have it. There was another study that was done. I'm actually going to put this out as a reel to show that 70% of daytime fatigue in people who are almost everybody, doesn't just mean like workplace people, just 70% of daytime fatigue comes from dehydration. And just remember that when you're sweating, you're not just sweating out salt. People think that it's just salt. You're sweating out selenium, zinc, magnesium, potassium, all of these electrolytes. So you want to be having it through water and through exogenous electrolytes.
Yeah, so we'll wrap up here, but I want to know what electrolytes are you using?
I'm, of course, using the momentous ones. I was using Element. I'm not supported by this, but I was using the LMNT. They were really salty. It's like having a brick of salt. So,
which is a salt company that makes electrolytes. Okay. And they're fantastic. But I like how it's salty and sweet at the same time. I actually really like it. But, you know.
With everything you have, like we are humans at the end of the day. So you have to like what you don't want to just go and, close your nose and have greens or close your nose and have something just because it's good for you. You got to find something that's right for you.
Yeah, I learned that early on because I used to love spirulina, and it's so horrendous to take that I was like, well, if I can take this, I can take anything. And I'm like that now. I can eat liver and not care because I'm like, it's so good for me that I don't really care what it tastes like. But other people just buff with spirulina or with liver. I get through it. I want to ask you about your newsletter and your podcast and how we can keep in contact with you. Feel free to take your time going through this, particularly because you mentioned your newsletter. So how do we sign up for that?
So if you go to my Instagram, if you just go to Louisa Nicola with an underscore at the end, you'll see a link in my bio. It's a tap link. It takes you to everything. So we have a wonderful newsletter that goes out to over 45,000 high performers. So it breaks down the scientific and medical literature that you need to perform at your best. That goes out once a week. It's free. We also have a wonderful podcast. It's called the Neuro Experience. It goes out weekly, and it goes out on various topics of brain health and physiology. And everything else you can find on the Neuro Athletics website.
You're an absolute, you're a well of information. It's so nice to talk to you, a fellow Aussie. You're incredibly gifted and serious about what you do, and it's an honor to get to talk to people like you, honestly. And I wish you the best of luck in all that you do. I'll continue to post your reels too. They're awesome.
Thank you so much, Luke. And you are doing a wonderful job entertaining me on a daily basis. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, that's good. If I can at least release a couple of synapses, then I've done my job.
Thanks, Luke.
Pleasure to talk to you.